think there's any kind of visual for
What is this?
Same thing you were looking
Yours is nice and straight.
Yeah. Short to the point. Six or seven of us.
I knew I brought a couple of things. And we'll go through the delicate stuff. Or you better just. That's no worries.
Pull up the agenda here just to make sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember when all of our.
20 seats, fellas, take a seat.
Like all of our business kids who take like the sports and marketing class, they're going down.
I've got 7 o'clock and we'll call the Monday, January 10th regular Board of Education meeting to order. Vicki, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Nikki Austin is present. Dan Bardoff.
Present.
Rich Jeffrey.
Present.
Terry Ellison. Present. Teresa Keen.
Yes, present.
Cheryl McGuire.
Here.
Dylan McGuire.
Here.
Phil Vosberg. Tim Wolf.
Okay, we have a quorum and we are in session. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
Second.
A motion by Dan and a second by Terry by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we're gonna dig into recognition. That's what all you fine folks are here for tonight. And we are going to start off with Rory Babler, Abraham Lincoln.
Absolutely. All right, Marie, you ready? All right, come on. I'm gonna brag about you for a little bit. Right here. Good. All right, from Abraham Lincoln is Rory Babler, and she was our student of the month. Just getting to know Rory this year, she is an excellent student of the month. She is definitely a student leader in our building, and I will let Mrs. Butler tell us more about her.
Yeah, so she is definitely a leader, not only in the building, but in the classroom. When you think about academics and Rory, she gives it her best effort every time, and she is right in the thick of any conversations happening. I can depend on Rory to give her opinion or her thought about something, and she's really good about piggybacking off of other classmates. She'll say, I know that so-and-so said this, and this is what I'm thinking from that. So that is some great conversation that she's starting to incorporate in her learning. As far as like a peer and a classmate in the room, she is so well liked. The kids know that they can go to Rory and get help from her, or can see that someone's having trouble and be right there to help them if they need it or want it. So she is a gem to have in the room, and I'm very honored to present Rory to you.
Hi, Rory. My name is Rich. I'm with the Board of Education. It's great to hear some of those wonderful things about you. It sounds like you really know how to persevere and be a good keeper or a caretaker for all of your fellow students. And those are great qualities for you to have, and it makes Abe Lincoln a really special place. And we thank you for everything that you do there every day. To remember this evening, we've got a certificate and then a gift card for Barnes & Noble for you to buy something there. I just wanted to say thank you from the whole board. Keep up the great work. Congratulations. Okay. Up next, we have Monroe High School.
Skipped right to us.
Yep, I think, yes.
Others are gone.
So the Monroe High School Student of the Month is Keely Mulligan, sophomore at Monroe High School, and she was nominated by Mrs. Roy. So I'll let Mrs. Roy talk about her and brag about her for a few minutes, and then let you do the same, Rich.
That is an easy task. So, so I have the privilege of having Keely in bio, and she's just amazing. Like, what I love is that it's not just that she gets her work done, but it's about excellence. So you ask her for, like, I'd like you to elaborate on this. And so instead of, so what I see often is like, oh, exactly how many words do you need? Or like, does it have to be a complete sentence? And Keely doesn't ask those questions. She just does it. And it's a complete sentence and it has plenty of words. And they're the right ones. And she pushes herself to make sure that it is well done. Like, she wants to be proud of it. It's not just about the grade, it's about the learning, and it's about producing things that she's proud of, and that's really exciting to watch, and it's a privilege be around you. So thank you for that, and the way you reach out to your peers as well. So thank you.
Keely, thanks for being here tonight with us. It's great to hear that you've got some amazing qualities. You're self-starter, you're intrinsically motivated, you're digging in and doing the hard work. Those characteristics are going to serve you very well in the years to come. I just want to thank you for everything that you do at the high school every day to make it a better place. And from the entire board, thank you so much. I've got a certificate here and a gift card to Barnes & Noble for you to get yourself something there. Thank you. And our Lamp of Learning winners from the remainder of the schools are unable to be with us this evening, correct?
So yes, I believe so. No,
Okay.
I'm staff excellence.
So now we're on to staff excellence. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Sure. So the Staff Excellence Award winner this month is Enriqueta Erickson. She's an educational assistant at Monroe High School. So Kata, come on up. I'm super excited about this one because when I put it out to the staff and said, would like to get some nominees for Staff Excellence Award winner, I had several staff members come back to me and say, it's got to be Kata. And I'll read one of them. Ryan Struns, he couldn't be here tonight, but he wanted me to read this for him. And then I'll talk about you a little bit too. So since Kata joined the MHS team, she has been a constant advocate for our English language learner students. She works relentlessly to provide the best learning environment for these students, some of whom have extremely limited English skills. She's a problem solver who cares deeply for her students. When a recent staffing change in our ELL program created some logistical challenges, Kata did not hesitate to go the extra mile to ensure that her students still receive the services that are helping them gain the language skills that they will need for their academic success. And that, in a nutshell, is Kata. She's our go-to person. I say this to Kata all the time. Our population of students who do not speak English has exploded, especially this school year. We had 13 students transfer in just this year who have little to no English skills at all. That's reading or writing. And Kata is the one that not only they go to, but the families go to. You think of interpretation, meaning that we just need to interpret between us and their parents usually, but that's not the case. What it is they're in our classrooms, and our teachers, besides our Spanish teachers, do not speak any Spanish as well. So Kata is the one that has to translate the work that they're doing, what the information that they're receiving, their homework, everything, every communication, everything. And recently we've had our lead ELL teacher move on. And it's really hard, as you know, to find anybody, any teacher at all, and we really haven't been able to find someone to fill that position. So Kata's taking on the big burden of that. So she's doing everything. I keep telling her she is our ELL program right now. And she's really, really helping out these students. So I don't know what they would do without her, and I don't know what we would do without you. So thank you so much, Kata.
Kata, from the board, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you stepping up into this role for us. If it weren't for your efforts to care for all of our Spanish-speaking students, they very likely would not be able to achieve or participate as well in this year as you are enabling them to. We can't thank you enough. I've heard lots of wonderful things from the administration about how you just keep stepping up and picking up all the slack for that entire need, and it's amazing. So thank you very, very much from the entire board. I've got a plaque here for you to remember this evening, and I'm going to give you the floor if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm a little nervous, but just want to thank everyone for recognizing my work. I really appreciate everything you guys do for me, and for giving me the opportunity to and believing in myself. This I would like to dedicate to my colleague, Hannah Ormson, who has stepped into and is helping our ELL students. Also to my children and my students who are my motivation. Thank you all. Thank you.
Mr. Bain, you're up, sir.
like to recognize Ms. Megan McGuire for our Staff Member of Excellence. And we were not able to get together with her last month, so she is joining us this evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about her as an educator and a classroom teacher in a minute, but I want to go through her list of accomplishments and all the value that she adds to our building, because it's a rather extensive list. So she is one of the advisors of our student council. That student council has won the Spirit of Excellence Award from the Wisconsin Association of Student Councils. They were also a runner-up for that award. The year previous to that, she organizes every, right before Christmas, our Frosty Fun Days, which is a fun, holiday-oriented celebration for our kids, because it's okay to have fun in the middle of a pandemic, and you should with middle school kids. And so that undertaking is rather extensive. It's probably easier to plan a mission to Mars than it is to plot that out, but she does so with incredible patience and making sure she minimizes impact on her fellow educators and maximizes fun for the kids. She is always recognizing staff and students. We start all of our faculty meetings off with a recognition of peers. And Megan usually has about 5 to 10 recognitions she wants to give to her peers. And it's just always a source of just a great feeling, right? And especially in these times, being able to hear from somebody that they respect so much and just being called out in that positive way. So you're always on that. The blood drive, which is one of the things that our student council has done, and I believe the largest collection of blood, if you will, of any blood drive in the county. And and again, it's a group effort, but it doesn't happen, Megan, without you and our other advisors. Schoology, which is our learning management system. She presented at the national conference here a couple of years ago. If anybody in our building has questions about Schoology and how it works and what to do, Megan is there. When we roll over at the try or the semester, she's always pushing out resources like, here's how you save stuff. Here's how you do stuff. Hey, it's the new try. Here's what you want to do. Our fundraiser, our annual fundraiser, without which we don't have field trips for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Student council, Ms. McGuire, that is another huge mission to Mars undertaking. Growing student leaders, always finding kids in our building that are looking for that next level and that next step in their development, taking them under her wing, and certainly students that may not currently see their capabilities, their latent expertise, but you see it and you bring them into the party and you grow them as leaders. Staff dress-up days, student dress-up days, our equity group, which we're getting up and running, which will look rather like equity for everybody up at the high school, but Megan's been in on the ground floor of that. Volleyball tournaments for the kids, again, having fun at the middle school level. A basketball coach, and that's just, I'm forgetting some stuff, and I apologize for that, because the list goes on and on. We are actually not quite sure when you sleep. So, and then we come to you as an educator, just as an outstanding science teacher and collaborator with your peers. You're always there for them. You have great idea after great idea after great idea. You're just a fountain of good thoughts and thinking and problem solving, always being solution focused. Wayne Martin, who was subbing for Ms. Burke one day, I'm walking down the hall, he comes out and he's pointing into Megan's room and he's like, she's great. So, and he's absolutely correct. And so anybody that's had the pleasure of spending any time in your classroom or in your presence understands that you are what quality education is all about. And you serve as an example in our building for that. And you make us better by your presence. So I can't think of a more deserving individual. Thanks for working at the middle school.
Ms. McGuire, I can't thank you enough for all your efforts to help build deep, meaningful relationships with the students that you're there to educate, and then as well as all of your peers. It's amazing that, and I wanted to thank you for owning sort of a piece of the success of everybody around you and helping to pull together your team and to lead them to make the middle school a better place. So from the board It was a plaque to remember the evening. Thank you so much for all of your efforts, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. This year's been hard. There's not a lot of sleep, but it is nice to be appreciated. So thank you for that. A little something to make the day a little better. I do sleep occasionally. So all of those things are team efforts. Like none of it's done alone. So my science team, fills in so that we can go to things like the blood drive and do some of that stuff. Or, I got my support, Mrs. Thibodeau, in the back corner, like cheering me on and doing stuff too. So none of it's on my own, but thank you for the recognition.
And you all are more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you'd like. Otherwise, you're free to go. If I could get all of the Lamp of Learning winners up front, we'll get one quick picture before you guys take off, and then you can enjoy the rest of your evening. Please come on up.
Do you want the staff excellence too or no?
Staff excellence as well, yes?
You guys can just light up here.
Use your chance.
Yeah, if you want to. I'll just
No bunny ears.
maybe just scoot in like a little.
Yeah, right?
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Were they in there in the front?
They were in there, yeah.
Oh, well, that's okay. That's good, right?
Yeah. I'll take Billy's running on that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what are you doing, shaking the can?
2 liters outside to keep them cold. No, Kevin says.
All right. Okay, we're gonna move on to consent agendas. Does any board member wish to remove a consent agenda item for individual consideration? Hearing none, we'll read them into the record. We've got Board of Education meeting minutes for December 13th, 2021. Approval of support staff retirement, Sandy Buell, middle school custodian. Rebecca Larson, Parkside EBD aide. Approval of support staff resignation, Stacy Christensen, Monroe High School attendance secretary. Approval of support staff hiring, Laura Wenger, assistant to director of curriculum and instruction. Approval of support staff transfer, Andrew Campbell to the Monroe Middle School custodian coordinator. Approval acceptance of community donations, Howard and Marianne Johnson, $35 to the Backpack Buddies. Rolling Hills Dairy Producers, 35 pounds of cheese to the Backpack Buddies. Rick and Nancy Malcheski, Charitable Fund, $100 to the Backpack Buddies. An anonymous $300 donation to the Backpack Buddies. Mitchell and Katie Haig, recorders for the Parkside Elementary. And the Richard J. Sarles Estate, $227,325.87 to establish 5 continuing scholarships. I think there's quite a bit to recognize in here. A couple of support staff retirements, over 50 years of experience departing the district, and we thank them for their service. And Stacy's service to us for 13 years in the district as she moves on. Ron, do you have anything you want to note about the estate donation from Mr. Sarles?
Not a lot. I mean, Mr. Sarles apparently was a student of Monroe School District as a child, attended here through 11th grade, actually moved away to Washington and finished his school there, went off to the Air Force for a couple of years, came back and attended the Greene County Teaching School for a couple of years, and then spent his career working down in Rockford, not in the teaching profession, but I think it speaks to how much he valued education, that he left his estate to 2 different school districts. I think it also speaks to the impact schools have on people that 85 years later, he remembers his experience at the Monroe School District and left this generous gift to the Monroe School District, which is greatly appreciated.
Absolutely.
And will be obviously supporting children for decades to come.
Mr. Spielman likes to say a donation for good forever, correct? All right, I would entertain a motion to approve those items.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Teresa and a second by Nikki. By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. I have nobody signed up for public comment this evening. Is there anybody here for the purpose of making public comment? Okay, no public comment. We'll move on to old business. First item is discussion and approval of Mueller non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy updates. This is our second reading, so we'll need a motion and a second on this one. Does anybody have any questions for administration on any of the policies detailed under that item? Hearing none, be looking for a motion.
So
I'll second.
Got a motion by Phil and a second by Teresa to approve the Neola non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy updates 1 through 15 as presented and recommended by policy. By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. And we're on to new business, 8A. We'll go through the audit report, our annual audit required of us. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, we got Dan is here from Refu, Boss, Jacobson, Roth, and Coster, and so Dan Jacobson is the overseeing auditor for the entire project. Obviously, he has a couple of his staff who come out and work on site throughout the majority of the audit. There'll be a couple of comments he can mention. And Dan, if you just want to go over how it goes, yeah, come on up.
Thank you, Ron. I'd also like to thank your staff for putting up with our staff, which we aren't part of their daily work, and obviously we come in and kind of disrupt things, but they're always helpful, and we were able to get through the audit and get things done. I'd like to commend you people as well. It hasn't been an easy year for anyone, but just want to know that we as our firm appreciate your dedication to the school district as well, so thank you. You should all have a copy of the audit report. You've seen these numbers before. These are the numbers that Ron presented at the annual meeting. They're 6 months old. But what we had to do, we had to take those numbers and just do verifications on them, make sure that they're in the right places, the numbers are accurate, there's, the cash is where it's supposed to be, those types of things. And that's what we've done. In past years, I've kind of picked different spots out in the report to go through. This year, I just want to spend a little bit of time at the front section, which is actually Ron's section of the report, the administration's discussion and analysis, actually your portion of the report. If you would go to page 3. That just gives you the snapshot of where the district is under a generally accepted accounting principle basis of accounting, which is a method that you guys don't use for your typical fund accounting. But it does show a good snapshot comparing 2021 and 2020. And, some of the key items there, I guess the biggest item is if you look at the bottom, that's your total net position is $34,262,000. That's per GAAP basis, that's what the school district is worth. That's your net position. Obviously, the majority of that is buildings because a lot of the other money comes in and out during the year, but there's certain assets and liabilities that are included in that, but the majority of it is the capital assets, and if you look towards the top, that's a $28 million number. And there's a lot of other things that are ins and outs regarding pensions and some things, but that makes up the bulk of that. The next page, on page 4, the only item I want to note, the change from those 2 years on the prior page was $4.2 million at the bottom of the 2021 column. The majority of that change compared to the prior year was the increase in the federal and state grants, which obviously with COVID and everything else, there's a lot of extra funding coming in to those programs. So the revenues went up. Expenditures were held actually a little bit less than what they were in the prior year using the GAAP basis. So just wanted to note that. And if you go back to page 7, that is the report that says this is what we did on your financial statements. First paragraph just says this is what we've audited. Second paragraph says these are your financial statements, you're responsible for them. And one of the comments we have to make every year is regarding the preparation of these statements. And that's in another report towards the rear, but basically we pull these statements together for the district, but they're still your statements, you're responsible for them. We review them with Ron, and but his staff doesn't have the training to, for all the footnotes and everything. You look at this, it's an 80-some page document. So we are tasked with pulling them together, and then you guys review them, make sure that they make sense to you, and we go on. Our responsibility beyond that then is to express an opinion on them based on our audit. And then the next few paragraphs tell, what some of those tasks that we perform are. But then on the second page there, under opinion, that basically says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. The respective financial position of the government activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the school district as of June 30th, 2021, and the respective changes in financial position, therefore, for the year then end in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. That's the paragraph that you guys want to see. You don't want to see something there that's qualified or adverse. So that means that what we found was in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. And it talks about some of the other matters that are included in the statement, and you can read through those. Page 10, you'll see that net position number again. Page 11 is the GAAP basis district-wide statement of activities, which breaks things down a lot differently than how you do it. But again, that $4.2 million net change is included there. Third line from the bottom, third number from the bottom. The next 2 pages are what you're probably more used to seeing. This is the balance sheet using governmental fund treatment. And you see there the total fund balance there is only $15 million. Main reason for that is that for fund balance accounting, you don't include your assets, your fixed assets, you don't include your debt, so the net of all those types of things are what make that change from the 34 million to the 15.4 million. And the next page, on page 12, actually takes you from one number to the other. So if you ever want to say, okay, why is this different? This page is the worksheet that spells out what's different between the GAAP basis and the fund basis of accounting. And then on page 13, that would be the fund basis revenues, expenditures, and change in fund balance. You can see there the total governmental fund balance change there, or total change is $6 million. Beginning fund balance was $9 million, and then the ending fund balance was at the $15 million that we just talked about. But to get from that $6.189 million number to the 4.255 change that we had on the gap basis statement, that is spelled out on page 14. Numbers are similar to what they were last year, but there's different things that get included and not get included to make that change. Footnotes starting on page 15 spell out a lot of your policies, procedures, give detail for some of the numbers included. I don't plan on going through really any of that in any detail. Anyone has questions on any of this as I'm going by it, please feel free to, to ask. And the back section includes some combining schedules for some of the front information. Starts on page 50. On page 63 is where the schedule of expenditures of federal awards is included. And that goes on for a few pages. Basically what that schedule does is takes you through the various federal agencies that you receive funding from. Includes what's, if you had a receivable from the prior year, it shows what grant or reimbursements were received, what you expended, and then whatever's receivable at the end of the year. So you see page 63 is the Department of Agriculture. There's some COVID funds in that. Page 64 starts the Department of Education. You've got your Title I, your IDEA funds. Again, there's COVID money there on page 65 that came in and was spent. Then on page 66 at the bottom, there's the Department of Health Services, which is just one program, which is the Medicaid Assistance Program. So that, that is the total of all the federal funding that came through the district. $3,090,000. Then on page 67 is your state financial assistance. Obviously, the majority of that is your general equalized aid and your special education aid that you receive. And that, that totals $20 million. Then there's some separate footnotes that actually talk about those specific schedules that follow them. Beyond that, if someone has something that they'd like me to go into a little more detail, I'd certainly be glad to. But again, these are numbers that you've seen. You kind of, you work with them every month, so.
Yeah, some of the biggest on the change in position, one of the bigger things is obviously we had the $5.6 million of revenue come in for the capital projects fund, and then we only spent about $250,000 within that fiscal year. So you have a big chunk of revenues that came in without a lot of expenditures. And so that was a large part of that raising up. Couple things, Dan mentioned our staff, and, commend his staff too. They work really well together and they do a good job with the audit. But as I think whenever Megan mentioned earlier, it's been a rough year, and certainly I know Lisa and Julie have done a lot with tracking various student or various staff things with all the COVID-related absences and other things that come in, some of the new provisions that come in and apply to payroll. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Heather and the work she's done, both in the sense of all the grants and the grant codings for all the new grant revenues and expenditures we have. And then probably the biggest project we had this year, which addresses one of the things in our comments, is actually we now with the GASB had to consolidate all of our activity accounts from the buildings into the district general fund, well, not the general fund, but into the district central office for administration. And so what it'll do is, we've had a couple, 3 years where we've had the common number one that, some of our accounts don't always line up with the signers. And so with principals and assistant principals changing and with the county secretaries in the buildings changing, there's always seemingly some account out there that doesn't get adjusted to whoever the new staff is. We're always about a year behind in catching that up. Having that all centralized now will help remedy that issue that we have. And then the other comment that was out there referenced a miscommunication between Julie and myself and our bank. And even once the audit came along and Ben was working through it, we had to kind of circle back to the conversation 2-3 times. So there was a conversation about a letter of credit, which was basically our collateralization. We were communicating to them that we weren't going to need our line of credit, which means our borrowing in December. And in the interim, for about 5 months, we didn't have that letter of credit in place, which is basically just an assurance from the federal banking that they will, cover any part of our accounts that are above the FDIC limits. And so they did. I appreciate the fact that they caught that, so that we have that protection in place. But it is the second comment that is in your summary as well. So.
Okay. Nothing else. I thank you again for the opportunity to provide the services to the district, and good luck going forward.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
I didn't drop quite the crowd.
No.
That's all right.
All right. Before we move on, any additional questions for Ron? Thanks again. Have a good night. Okay. We're going to move on to item B. It's a discussion and potential approval of some COVID-19 updates. So there are 3 things we're going to go through during this discussion. The first one, I think we'll just get a current state of numbers in our buildings. We'll talk a little bit about current COVID numbers in the region and state. After that, the administration has 2 proposals to bring to us. One of them is in regards to asking for early childhood students and 4K students. We had a request to us from some community members that have 4K students asking why, given our rationale for our current protocols, why we weren't requiring masks for those ages that are unable to our COVID positive return to school, to align that with Greene County Public Health's current practices. So those are the 3 things we're going to talk about. Just to kick it off a little bit, we can cover current state. So for the district, according to Wisconsin DHS, we're currently at about 23 cases per day on a 7-day average. That rate has doubled in the last 7 days. For the county, we're at 62 per day, doubled in roughly 8 days. Greene County currently sits at a critically high level with a burden of 1,188. Greene County vaccination rates currently at 63% for the first dose, 60% for the second dose. SSM Health Monroe began providing details on admittance aligned to their vaccination status. As of today, 100% of the patients hospitalized for COVID are not vaccinated. 100% of the patients in ICU for COVID are not vaccinated. And 29% of all hospitalized patients are COVID-19 patients at SSM Health in Monroe, which again goes to highlight if you have not been vaccinated, please consider getting vaccinated. our current, and now we'll talk a little bit about the numbers current in our schools. I'm going to turn it over to Joe and.
Sure, I mean, I'll just start out by talking a little bit about the plan, where we're currently at, how we've been operating, and then, you know, Sam, I can certainly share the numbers, but it doesn't seem fair to take your numbers away from you, seeing as you're the one who's doing the lion's share of the work, so I think you should speak to those. I think the board's pretty aware that back on December 13th, we approved a plan with some updates. I think since that time, which given there's a holiday break in there, but we had a couple of weeks prior to the break and then some time afterwards, I think the administration, Sam, felt pretty good and pretty comfortable about the plan that was approved and how that was playing out. I think if you also consider the feedback or lack thereof from the community on both sides of the issue, I think we're in a pretty good place and people were feeling fairly good about where we're at. Obviously, over the last couple of weeks, some things have shifted and there's been some things that have forced us to look closer at our plan. But what we're clearly recognizing is that we're seeing an increase in our numbers within the district. We knew coming back from the holiday break that the numbers that we saw at that time would increase over the course of the week, and certainly the weekend proved to be quite active, if that's fair, Sam.
Yep.
And so I'll turn it over to Sam to talk a little bit about the current numbers and the activity she saw today as well.
Yeah, so it was a really busy weekend. Last week was really okay. We kept kind of waiting for the bottom to fall out after watching the news, what was going on around the rest of the state and country. But that hit us this weekend. So we had 16 positive cases come in yesterday. Thank you very much for the hours from my health assistants. Everybody helped out yesterday and it was great. Today was also busy. We probably had almost 10 cases today come in. Still working on a couple of them, but we currently sit at, I had 3 extra after I did the initial dashboard today. So we're at 45 student cases right now. We've got 6 positive staff cases. Majority of that activity is at the middle and high school right now, but we typically see that start there and then it kind of rolls over into the elementary schools. So this is kind of the way that it's been. Right now that leads to about 139, 140 kids that are in quarantine that are not vaccinated, 86 kids that are vaccinated but exposed. So, yeah. The interesting part for me has been we currently have 11 out of the 16 at the high school that are positive that are vaccinated. So that's been a really big change that we've started to see since coming back from break. Is prior to that, most of our cases were in unvaccinated people. And we're starting to see that shift where it's not really mattering if you're vaccinated or boosted. It's hitting everybody.
That's one of our staff members too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as that issue goes, I think that's pretty fair. Certainly, you know, like we'd said, we've got the plan that we approved on the 13th. You all remember that basically identified a default plan and then a heightened COVID response plan, that if we hit the threshold of 50 positive student cases on a 3-day rolling average, that heightened response plan would go into effect. Given the numbers that Sam has shared, and I quickly punched in what you just updated for today, if you look at a trend line, that means that probably it's fairly likely that by the end of the week, we hit that 3-day rolling average for 50, and we might be triggering that heightened COVID response plan starting next week. So certainly there was some discussion about, given the numbers and the steep climb over the last few days, whether or not we needed to make a recommendation to veer from the plan. I personally feel, and I know Ron Todd feel the same way, Sam as well, that the plan that was approved on the 13th is sound. I think it took this potential scenario into account, and that's why we have the heightened COVID response plan. And so I think we have to follow the plan as it's approved and see where the numbers take us. But at this point, if that trend continues, we could be in that heightened plan next week. I think it's also fair to say that I think most of you are aware, we communicated the approved plan prior to going on holiday break to all parents and communicated with the staff. And while everyone received the email, I think it's also important to note that not everyone always pays close attention to those emails. So we may want to consider whether or not additional communication is necessary, because we certainly don't want to surprise anyone. But the plan has been communicated, and should it be necessary, we're going to want to be ready to execute that plan.
And how would we do that? How would the extra communication go?
Well, if that were necessary, I think what we would probably want to do is I would want to talk to the principals and get a sense of what they think would work best. I think if you ask Sarah at Abe Lincoln what works versus Jeremy at the high school, they might give us two different answers. And so I think developmentally, we might want to use the best approach for the building unless someone sees it differently. But I think the Skylert message that was sent out, I believe on the 22nd of December, was good. It covered everyone in a couple of languages. But I think we need to perhaps take a more personal and targeted approach if we get close to that period.
That 50 average that we approved, is that students and staff members?
Students only.
Students, but so if we're only at 45 now, why do we think that we're gonna hit the rolling average? Isn't the numbers going up, but?
Yeah, so if you chart the numbers since coming back from break and you look at a trend line, the climb is taking us in a direction that suggests that we're gonna hit 50 for 3 consecutive days. Now, you don't know that for sure, right? We can't predict the future, but as of right now, based on the data that we have over the last week plus, it suggests that we're climbing right now.
You guys want to share the absence rates today that could be folks waiting for tests, could be folks just now contracting COVID?
Sure. Let me find that in my stack here. So
This is another leading indicator for you.
Rich was a part of a little bit of communication today, and he asked if we would pull some of the attendance data across the buildings. This is just for today. At Abe Lincoln, we had just under 10% out. At Northside, we had just under 14% out. Parkside was just over 17%. Middle school was just over 22%. High school was 27%. So as a whole, our district, we had 20% of our student population was out. Now, please understand, not all of that was due to illness, COVID or otherwise, but the vast majority of it was. I didn't get that breakout for high school, but a significant percentage of those were out due to illness. We didn't break it down to COVID necessarily, but we know that, and Sam, you're probably better equipped to answer this than I am. In addition to COVID-related issues, we have some GI issues going around, as well as a couple other things.
Exactly. A lot of headaches, a lot of stomach aches. And the hard part with COVID right now is that could be COVID-19. You really don't know until you get tested. So yeah, it's kind of a rock and a hard place. You know, prior to COVID, these were things that were like, okay, you know, we'll give it a couple days, see how you feel. Now we're like, oh no, what if you're here and you're spreading it around? So it's kind of a rock and a hard place. We are also hearing that it's hard to find testing right now. The community site was not able to run this morning. So yeah, it's been a challenge too for families to find testing when they're not feeling well. We have a lot of pending tests out. That's some of that also.
Have you seen sort of the percentage of folks taking advantage of test to stay, the 139 close contact quarantines? How's that?
We did over 30 this morning. We had 2 positives out of that. So yeah, I would anticipate tomorrow morning's gonna look pretty similar to today.
The issue we're running into there is, much like our community program, the federal and state tests that we're supposed to be rolling to school districts have dried up as well. And so we probably have enough tests to get through the next couple of days, maybe 3 days, but then unless more supplies are found, which at this point they don't have them, we'll run out of tests for our test to stay program as well. We're obviously looking for paid vendors where we can find that as well, but that's obviously very difficult as well. And, you know, there's, even though we can cover it with some ESSER 2 funds, that gets pretty costly pretty quick if we're, you know, testing 50 or more kids a day, so.
Just future reference, I did hear the Alliant Energy Center open back up.
Yes,
I did hear that today as well.
yes.
The Alliant Energy Center open back up again for testing.
An additional piece of information, just as far as staff, Sam, I don't know if this number changed at all, but we're looking at, in terms of positive staff, it's still at 5, is that correct?
6,
6 now?
and I've got a couple pending.
And so as far as staffing, I think we've been pretty clear all along. We're gonna do everything within our power to keep our kids in school. That's been one of the things that the board has been clear about. We want to serve our kids in our buildings. We absolutely don't want to go back to virtual. The one thing that could potentially threaten that, excuse me, is if we don't have the staffing to open the doors and keep kids safe, right? So as of right now, we're not too bad, but in terms of sub coverage, it's a bit of a challenge for every 2 positions that need to be covered. One of those is going uncovered, one is being covered by a sub. So today we had 14 positions that we were able to get subs for and 13 that we had to cover using our internal staff. So give Jeremy and his staff a lot of credit. They're using some creative systems to cover classes as necessary in order to make a go of it and to help out staffing across the rest of the district. But I know Ron had come across some information in his group that suggested our coverage ratios are pretty consistent with what others are seeing.
Yeah, I had my MASBO meeting last Friday, which is the Madison area school business officials. I know Middleton shared that they had over 90 absences and they had over 40 unfilled substitutes. And so everybody that was in the room was kind of nodding and agreeing that they were living the same world. And as a matter of fact, 3 or 4 of the business administrators were serving lunch that day and a couple had driven buses that day. So this isn't the Monroe thing. That's hitting everybody right now. And I think you can also understand where a lot of our sub pool historically has been retired teachers, and a lot of those folks aren't necessarily looking to jump into the fray right now as well. So there's a real shortage out there right now for substitutes.
So I would say, well, that's certainly a concern. The one thing that we should celebrate is that our staff is stepping up over and over and over to make sure that our kids are getting what they need. I know there are other districts that aren't as fortunate as us in terms of people's willingness to step in and help out, help their colleagues, their teammates, their school, their district, and our folks are doing it consistently. So I think we need to celebrate the quality of the people that we have in our district.
Yeah, we can't thank those folks enough for continually stepping up to keep the doors open and keeping kids in school. It's very, very much appreciated. Absolutely.
Sam, do you get the information on whether it's like the Omicron variant or the Delta variant or anything like that? You just get the positive?
Yeah, you can't request that they do testing on any certain test to know which variant it is. It's all kind of generic. But yeah, the testing that's been done, I'm sorry, I was in a meeting last week and I can't remember what they said. The testing out of Madison and or Milwaukee, one of them was over 90%. They just pull some random samples and yeah, it's basically, yeah. Yeah, and I think too, what we've also seen is people are tending to get sicker sooner. You know, we used to see a little bit of that closer to 3 to 5 days between exposure and symptom onset, and we're seeing a much quicker turnover. Like, people are, like today, it felt like I was telling people they were a close contact, but they were homesick. That happened a number of times. And that hasn't happened before.
How much contact tracing have we had to do so far? I know as of Friday, we hadn't done any because it was all driven by the county, but
Yeah.
how about since then?
All of our new cases yesterday and today, maybe all but just a couple have required contact tracing. I'm really sorry. I can't tell you off the top of my head. It's been a whirlwind.
Sam, and it's okay to speak to your ability to sustain this and the capacity of the team, because I know today was tough.
It was really tough. I'll be honest, there's a couple kids we're still working on contact tracing for because it's just so involved. Our staff is phenomenal. It just takes time to go through and get a hold of those teachers and go through and, you know, see if someone's vaccinated or if they've had COVID or if they're at school that day or were they at school the day they were exposed or here today. It's just so many moving pieces and parts. And we had a lot of office visits across the district today. My health aides are phenomenal at stepping up to the plate and helping each other. But I heard it a lot of times today, like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I started this, but then I've got a room full of kids again. Yeah, we all needed a little bit of a pep talk at some point today to say, it's okay, we're doing the best we can. Keep putting one foot in front of the other, but
Today was the first day I've seen a line outside of the health office in a long time.
yeah. We're getting close to being buried.
Yeah, I'm just gonna interject. I think you're being a tad euphemistic. So, having watched you at the middle school today with our secretarial staff, it's intense.
Yes, thank you.
It's extremely intense and not sustainable.
That's it as far as the information that we have prepared to share. If there's any questions that you all have relative to the status update, we'd be happy to do our best to answer it, but.
Just curious, I know that, because I have a Northside kid, but Amy sent out an email saying that you kind of saw masks kind of dwindle last week. Is that same for some of the other schools, maybe the sixth graders and some of the?
I would say it started really strong on Monday and even into Tuesday. I truly believe kids came back from Christmas break just in the habit. And our bus kids get off the bus, they have their mask on, they leave it on. Then, you know, we have to let them know, like, if they see kids without masks, right? And so we have to tell them, well, it's your choice now. And for elementary kids, we say that's your family's choice. Do as your parents ask you. But yeah, by the end of the week, there were a lot less masks.
Do you think like 10%?
Oh, yeah, I would say it was at least 50% at the beginning of the week, if not more, in some classrooms, sometimes like 80%, and then it went down to maybe 10%.
I think it's increased a bit at the high school, but it's still low. I would say more than 25%, if that.
At the most.
Yeah.
Same middle school, what Katie said.
Any additional COVID status update questions for administration before we move on? A couple items here.
I just want to say thank you to all of the administration for all your extra time and efforts just to keep everyone safe.
I guess I have, if, is it in our plan to do the contact tracing? So if it gets to be unsustainable, does that mean that you guys will have to meet to suspend it? Or, I mean, we can't have staff,
Well,
you can't have staff go, you know, we gotta worry about their mental health too, right?
And that was kind of my question. If it's not sustainable, like what would you like to see or what can we do to help make it sustainable or what do you need?
Yeah, so I think in the heightened response plan, we have, where we've reached that point of, our average of 50. It's basically, we had 3 6th graders today that we were notified are positive. Your child may or may not have been exposed. If they're ill, please keep them home and get them tested. At the elementary level, it may look like, Mrs. Cessna's class had a positive COVID today. We're not contact tracing due to the plan that we're currently in. Please keep an eye on your kiddo. So that was kind of what was built into that December plan.
That's only in the heightened area.
In the heightened.
Correct. So to answer your question, as of right now, we are still contact tracing based on the plan as it's currently constructed, right? And so that's based on the definition of a close contact, which is within 6 feet for 15 or more minutes over time. And then when we do move to the heightened response plan, that's when we would no longer conduct contact tracing. But as you'll remember, the conversation we had, we wanted to make sure that we were providing notification of exposure, right?
So should we be doing that at an earlier level?
Yeah, that's
If this is overwhelming you already and we are.
So here's what I would ask. Rich laid out, we've got 3 pieces to this that we need to discuss. I think this is really starting to get into the territory of the third area, which we need to discuss. So I'm not trying to delay it, but I think in order to keep it clean, if we could just hold on to this for a few minutes, we'll get there because there are pieces to this that we certainly need to discuss. Good questions.
All right, okay, so we're gonna move on to the first recommendation from administration. So there's a proposal to amend our current protocols to recognize early childhood and 4K students that cannot be vaccinated. I ask you guys to kind of walk us through what you're proposing.
Sure, and Rich did a nice job opening up, explaining it. I think this came from, a couple things. One, I think the board has done a nice job of outlining the rationale for the decision-making up to this point. And primarily that's been, we wanted to provide an opportunity to our students and families to access the vaccine if they choose to do so. And then in time, once that's been established, relax the masking mandates and give parents and families some choices. Recently, we had some families of students that are in 4K reach out and ask how that rationale applies given the plan that was approved on December 13th and the rationale that's been applied previously. And I think we had to be honest and acknowledge that while there was a little bit of conversation, maybe not as much as that issue deserved. And after having some discussion with the admin team, we certainly looked at some different things. One of the things that we did is we asked Lizzie, actually in the corner, thanks Lizzie, to pull the distribution of ages for our 4K students. And as of today's date, roughly 53% are not old enough to access the vaccine. So in other words, they're under 5 years of age. We also know that that we have our early childhood students. We have approximately 10 students in that program, and they're all below the age of 5. And we provided some information there in terms of the number of students that have tested positive for COVID. And as you can see, we've had some activity in that area as well. We talked about mask wearing across the buildings just a couple of minutes ago. Special thanks to Sarah Judd for working with her team. Sarah, as you know, is not only the principal of Abe Lincoln, but is also our 4K director. So she asked all of the programs to estimate the mask wearing practices with the students across all of the programs. And it ranges anywhere from 0% to 100%. And I know that's not particularly helpful. So I can quickly run through it if you're interested, and if I can email this to all of you if you want it for your records. But at Rainbow, they have a mask policy, but it's not enforced. Is that the best way to explain it? In the morning program, 0% are masking. In the afternoon, 13%. Y has a mask mandate, so 100% of the kids are masked. Same is true of Monroe Preschool. St. Vic's follows our policy, so as of right now, we're mask optional, but they're at 81% in the morning and 80% in the afternoon for their masking practices. At Abe Lincoln, we have a couple of programs for our morning programs. One is at 67%, one is at 71%, and for the afternoon programs, one is at 80%, and one is at 88%. And then Head Start has a masking mandate due to the Dane County policies, and so they're at 100%. So overall, I would say the masking at the 4K level is significantly higher than anything that we're seeing in any of other grade levels or schools. Did all of that make sense? Sorry about that. So I just thought that was important. You know, given the rationale that the board has used up to this point, and the fact that the majority of kids in this category, early childhood and 4K, cannot access the vaccine, we felt it was appropriate to recommend an adjustment to the plan that would call for mandatory masking at early childhood and 4K for all students and staff that are in those programs. So certainly we'll open it up to any questions that you might have. It's also important to note that just as we do at any other level, if there are students that have special needs that require a masking exemption, we would certainly honor those plans as needed. So, any questions?
At Rainbow than the other ones, since they're not masking as much? Just curious.
Could you say that again,
Are there more
Cheryl?
cases at Rainbow, do we know, than the other ones, since they're not masking as much?
I can't say for certain.
Can't say for certain, okay, just curious.
And the hard part isn't that with the kids that age, there is some inconsistency in testing and what was being reported. Is that fair, Sam? So it's a good question, Cheryl. I don't know that we have that information.
Any additional questions for administration on this possible amendment?
Do we have data on how many of our 5 through 12-year-olds, now that they can get vaccinated, have?
Not any new data from December, no.
Or the closest to that would be our elementary vaccination rate, right?
Yeah.
And was that at 35% roughly last time you reported this? Or what was that at, Sam?
I have no idea.
It was low 20s at that point in
Yeah,
time,
so
but
it's
that was
20.
still pretty early in the process, so we would assume that some more have finished since then.
And we have seen more people getting it. I would definitely say it's not anywhere near middle and high school numbers.
Where do you think the high school is at?
They were just about 50. And like I said, a lot of those kids are, due for boosters and getting their boosters, but we're starting to see them get sick too.
So we've got a recommendation from the administration to mask the early childhood and 4-year-old kindergarten programs, as well as the staff conducting those programs. Does anybody wish to make that motion?
Can I ask one more
Okay.
question?
Absolutely, we can have discussion.
Do you think the teachers will be okay? I mean, you don't expect pushback from the teachers that are.
We had that at the 6th and 7th grade level. There were some, right? And we did it all semester. And we had some sixth grade teachers that are not happy because other people in the building didn't have to. That's,
I think it probably also relates somewhat to your, the variation within some of the community programs might also tend to, you can maybe guess where some of the choices will be made, right? So.
Was it an overwhelming number of families reaching out asking for this? Was it 2 families
It was
What sparked this?
2 in particular that reached out. And I think, it's first I would say we recognize that making this recommendation, forces the board to make a decision that basically make an adjustment to what we approved on December 13th. I think the challenge for us is when we're answering these questions, we like to have a clean and clear rationale and a defensible position. And up to this point, we talked about the rationale. We weren't necessarily able to apply that rationale to the 4K and early childhood program. We'll obviously do whatever the board approves and we'll move forward with that. But our position was that if we're going to use a rationale that we're trying to protect kids and afford them the opportunity to access the vaccine, that this recommendation is in alignment with that practice.
The 4K is optional, right?
4K is optional, yes.
What I'm struggling with a little bit here is, consistency.
Sure.
And the other thing is, if the trend line pans out, and we're mask everywhere by next week sometime, it's a moot point. So I'm struggling a little bit in that regard.
When we were, last semester, before Christmas, when we were masks for those under 12, did that include Rainbow and those facilities as well? I mean, so those kids have only not gone maskless for 2 weeks?
Yeah, Sarah, do you want to speak to how that was?
Each facility has their own masking policies. So right now, 3 of the, most of them were following ours and going mask optional. And then after kind of an outbreak started, so the YMCA, Monroe Preschool, and Head Start, all 3 of those are already mask mandated. So St. Vic's and our 2 programs, we're really only talking about 1 other program. 3 follow Monroe, 3 went to mask mandate. I don't know if that's helpful for you at all. So most of our neighborhood schools went to a mask mandate on their own.
I'm comfortable with this recommendation. I'm confused as to if you want to do it separately or if you want to do it as as part of a bigger.
I think it's probably cleaner to handle them separately.
Okay.
If we do mask required, for how long? How long would it be for? What's the trigger to?
If we follow the same rationale, I think it would be until there's a vaccine available for that
They
age
could be
group.
masked the entire year.
Or the age out, yeah.
So you're saying the other buildings can have their own policy, can they, so if we do this, can they have their own policy of not to mask? I'm trying to understand.
My understanding is that then they would follow the 4K guidelines because they fall under Monroe School District, the school district.
Yeah, technically, these are public school programs, so if we were to enact this policy, we could mandate that they follow our guidelines.
Oh. But it's okay to ask for masks if they were optional? I'm just trying to understand. Like,
Say that again, Cheryl.
but it's okay that they were asking to wear masks when we made it optional?
Oh, I see.
So you're asking about their autonomy to decide whether or not they can mandate them or not.
Yeah.
So they didn't necessarily follow us when we went optional, they
Yeah,
went
they didn't
mandate.
follow that, so that's why, do they have to, I'm just,
It's a good question. So with some of those programs, they don't have a choice, like Head Start, for example. Since it's run out of a Dane County agency,
right.
they're absolutely mandated to go mask. So, but your point is well taken. You know what, it works both ways, right? Go ahead, Jenna.
So last year, some of that was due to, like, some of them were in churches, some of them are in schools, some of them are in community daycare. So they were getting regulations from other parties, like daycares were saying, don't mask young children, right? So they're saying, hey, to stay licensed by our daycare association, we have to offer these options, right? Or we were saying our kids are virtual and coming every other week, but they were in a setting where they were able to provide kids education every day, where maybe the kids at Abe weren't getting to come to school every day. So last year, the directive was that they needed to clearly outline their plan and whatever those parts were, what they were doing from the district and what they were doing from their other governing body or agency that they were following, whether that be the building that they were renting, whether that be the daycare status that they were receiving funding from. So it was just that they had to clearly communicate with their families what they were doing. And we did, not a lot, but we maybe had 2 families switch sites last year because their personal values didn't align with maybe what their site was or wasn't able to offer. If that helps at all.
I guess that's where I was asking if 4K was optional, because I hope we won't have families that choose to pull their kids out.
But again, didn't we
I
have
don't
that
know.
all first semester?
But all of them, like all the kids did in the littles. Now you've got the littles who have older brothers and sisters that are going and don't have to. I guess I just don't know if, I don't know, Dan, that's why I'm asking the question.
I mean, that's a concern I have, and it's, I guess, why, I mean, 2 thoughts here. Where you left off there, Nikki, if, you know, if it's a family with 3 kids, and one's in 4K and the other are, you know, middle school or elementary, the older kids are not mandated to mask yet, but now the kid in 4K is, and I'm trying to get a sense for parent pushback. And I got a
That's
feeling that
all I'm
there may
asking.
be some of that.
That same rationale was already in place in December with a kid that was,
But those kids had to go to school. 5 through 12, it's
No, I'm
truancy,
saying
right?
if you had a
4K,
brother
they
or
have a
sister
choice.
at the middle school and it was 16 or middle school,
No,
the
I
high
know what
school
you
at
mean.
16
I know,
was not.
I know. They were optional and the youngers weren't, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying, is school isn't optional for those kids.
But we also did just change this, and now we want to change it again.
And that's a fair point, Cheryl, because, and that's something that we struggled with, because again, we felt very comfortable with the plan that was developed last
Most of the
month.
kids are wearing masks, except for Rainbow.
Yes, clearly.
And that was my other question with Rainbow, because, you know, they have quite a few kids there. We do have the authority to mandate masks in their 4K program, is that correct?
I mean, you might know better than I do, but my understanding is since they're part of a public school program, we collect membership aid on them. They're subject to our rules, policies, and guidelines.
Yeah, it would kind of come down to what Jenna says, unless they have, they can provide us that they have a guiding, you know, principle or ruling coming to them from the daycare side of the world, right? Because they do have daycare provided within their facility, then we would make the accommodation, but barring that, yes, they would follow what we're, you know, scheduled to do.
They would only have to do that during the program.
Right.
So if I've had a child at Rainbow attended the school program in the morning, they'd have to wear the mask per se, that's for example. But in the afternoon, if they're in that Rainbow program, not the school side of it, they wouldn't have to wear their mask.
And if they have younger siblings that are there as well, those siblings aren't masking and, or, you know, I mean, I'm just trying to think about, you know, I'm trying to put myself in a parent's shoes and you know, how that would work.
What is the interval and frequency of children in the early childhood and 4K program? How many days a week? How long?
4 days a week, and it's about a half a day.
Okay.
And EC is 2 days a week, half a day. So they come Monday, Tuesday morning for a couple hours.
And when they're done with their 4K session, Rich, then they would maybe take their mask off the other half of the day.
If they were at one of the
If
sites.
they were at one of the sites, the community.
The majority of our students would be either in our classrooms, you know, St. Vic or the 3 that are mandating. So yeah, the majority of them are, that might not necessarily apply to. It would just apply really to that one location.
Any additional questions for administration on this proposed amendment? looking for a motion if somebody would like to make it then.
So moved.
Which one are you moving?
To approve the
It's the one probably on page
second one?
6. Yeah.
motion to approve the COVID-19 guidelines for the early childhood and 4-year-old kindergarten programs requiring students and staff to wear masks as recommended by the administrative team.
Got a motion by Dan,
I'll second.
second by Tim. Any additional discussion?
And so this is just indefinitely until there's a vaccine. Is what we're leaving this as right now unless we choose to amend, correct?
Yep, unless we choose to amend, which we could do at any time. Okay. Should you call the roll, Nikki? Please.
Yeah. Nikki Austin supporting. Dan Bardoff,
Yes.
Rich Debris,
Yes.
Terry Allison,
Yes.
Teresa Keen,
Yes.
Cheryl McGuire,
No.
Dylan McGuire,
Yes.
Phil Vosberg,
Yes.
and Tim Wolf.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you for the discussion on that. So we'll move on to that second piece that administration is bringing forward to us. It'll be a discussion on aligning our, call them COVID positive admittance protocols. What do you want to call it, Sam? We're aligning that with Greene County Public Health.
Changing our timeframes to align with the CDC, the Wisconsin Department of Health and Greene County Public Health.
Could you walk us through what it is today and what you're proposing the changes?
Yeah, so the changes, the recommendations from all of those bodies are that instead of a 10-day quarantine, we offer a 5-day quarantine. So if you get a positive test, your timer starts on the day that your symptoms start or the day that you had that test. You complete the 5 days at home in quarantine, and then on day 6, if you're released from the health department or you meet their criteria, which is fever-free for 24 hours with improving symptoms, they could be admitted back to school, but they're required to wear a mask through day 10. That would also go for quarantines also. Quarantines are followed through 5 days also.
Previously, we were 7.
Yeah, you could test out on day 6 or 7 or finish a 10-day without any testing whatsoever.
So this opens up the test to stay program to COVID positive individuals that are not symptomatic on day 6 to return.
Correct.
And participate in test to stay, whereas before they had to wait the full 10 days.
Yep.
Before they could return.
So they would still have the option to complete the full 10 days, which we have had. So we've had a lot of conversations with families over the last week. Last week, Monday, Tuesday, no, we were not, subject to these new rules. And then we found out late Wednesday, Thursday that, yeah, schools are. So we've had a lot of conversations with families, kind of surprising, but we've had a number of families say, you know what, we're going to do the full 10-day, even though you guys are, possibly talking about it. It's been kind of interesting. But yes, we would open up our test to stay on that day 6. They could come in the morning. If they tested negative on a rapid antigen test, they could come to school that day. We'd also be willing to open that up for some afternoon testing if needed. The idea being that if you're positive and then you're negative, you're going to be negative the next day. Whereas right now, with our test to stay, we're really worried about catching those symptomatic people before they start school for the day.
Okay. So if they're not able to arrive, if they're not able to test in the morning, we're giving them an opportunity to test in the evening, the day prior to their
So they'd be
attendance.
back on day 7 if they chose.
Obviously you're concerned about testing supplies, so, if this goes away, which, based on what I'm seeing as well, it's gonna be hard to keep that, right? So then their option is to try to get a PCR test.
Yep, or stay home for 10 days, or, currently, The CDC guidelines don't say that you need a rapid antigen test negative to come back. That's something that we felt comfortable adding in as an option, just as kind of a fail-safe. Yeah.
You say that again, after 5 days, the CDC said you don't need a negative test,
Correct.
but we do right now.
Yes, we would be asking for that, as long as we had the test supplies.
And if we don't have the test supplies?
I guess it's up for discussion whether
This
we,
is where it comes back to the question you were asking a bit earlier, right? How are we handling this? How are we defining close contacts? How are we handling quarantines? I think we all felt very comfortable and confident about the plan that we have in place. But then as Sam came in this afternoon and kind of blew up the plan when she shared the information about the status of rapid antigen test availability, I think we have to be honest and say that we're concerned now because we're not going to likely have this test to stay program available to us long-term. If we get past this week, we'd be lucky, but chances are we're gonna run out of supplies sometime within the next 2 to 3 days. Is that fair, Sam?
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say there may be testing available whenever the next variant comes along, but not that's going to help us through the month of January is probably the best estimate.
So then it puts us in a position where we have to start asking questions about how do we define close contacts? How do we handle close contacts and quarantines? Do we need to change our response if we don't have the test to stay program available? And I think the concern is, and we've all had a lot of conversation recently about the number of instances of quarantine, the number of students that have been subject to quarantine. Sam had calculated recently that and we were gonna pull accurate numbers today, but it just wasn't fair to Sam to ask her to try and update those numbers. But the most recent estimate that she did suggested that out of all of the instances of quarantine, only 3% of the students have tested positive for COVID. So clearly we're casting a wide net. We have a lot of kids that are missing a lot of school, and we know there's an educational cost associated with that. Certainly we've received that feedback from some families, and we share that concern. We're just trying to find that middle ground of protecting the safety and health of our students and staff, but also not putting a lot of kids in a position where they're missing a lot of school.
What are you hearing from your vendors, from people you've contacted about accessibility of tests?
So I reached out to the state assigned laboratory that we work with, and they copy and pasted an email from the state saying that there's not this availability, which I'll be blunt, is kind of ironic and opposite of the information that we got from the state superintendent today that really pushed, testing in schools. And granted, they were also talking about other mitigation strategies such as masking everybody all the time. But there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I did reach out to the health department. They have no lines on anything. They've got some expired tests, but we can't use them. I touched base with a few of our other Greene County school districts, and everybody's in the same boat.
I think they have to assume that we're not gonna be able to get tests, right? I mean, you're saying they have supplies for 3 days. We'll watch the TV and no one has them. People are waiting 5 hours for tests and stuff like that. And maybe those tests are the PCR ones that you gotta wait 3 days to get a result for anyways.
What's the current CDC guideline? Do they require is it 5 days in a negative test?
No. CDC does not state that you need a negative test. It's just 5 days, and then as long as your symptoms are improving, you can return to work or school, but you must mask through day 10.
I mean, we just have to recognize that we're gonna run out of tests. And we're updating the policy tonight, and it's not gonna work.
So do we acknowledge that then, Phil, and say, we'll run the test to stay program as long as we can. In the absence of the tests, do we just require folks to mask for the full 10 days, at least the close contacts? We require them to mask for 10 days. Joe said that 3% of those folks were testing positives. There's a less likely chance they'll give it to somebody else if they're masked for those 10 days in lieu of having the tests. For the COVID positive individuals, what would you say, what would we say? We
I think
follow those guidelines a little closer, or?
I'm thinking for a COVID positive case that you're right. I think we need to put language in here that, you know, if supplies are available or we're able to accommodate the program, in the absence of being able to do that, it's 5-day quarantine, I guess. And they can return maybe, but wearing a mask. I'm trying to align with CDC guidelines because we've kind of made our case on CDC guidelines, you know, through the past year or whatever.
Yeah, I think.
And also our hand is forced a little bit that, you know, probably Ron's right, maybe in later February, there'll be an abundance of tests available, but that's, you know.
Yeah, I think that the federal government's kind of have to make a decision, right? They've made a commitment to, they have contracts for a number of tests. They've made a commitment to providing tests to American households, and I think they're going to have to come up with a decision as to where their priorities lie, if they're going to meet that, or if they're going to, you know, prioritize schools.
And just to clarify though, if the person's vaccinated, right, there's no quarantine.
Correct. They're
So-
still
so-
notified that they were exposed.
Right.
But yes, there is no quarantine if you're vaccinated or if you've had COVID in the last 90 days.
Or if you were masked at the time of
Correct.
exposure.
So those things have not changed.
And I think following the CDC guidelines more closely, Phil, I'm trying to recall back to the conversation. I think the reason that we included the test to return is because we're not following all of those guidelines. We're calibrating them to our reality here, but I think the mitigation and layers that CDC would like to see is that everybody is masked. So I think under those specific conditions, that's where those guidelines are coming from, where they say you can come back after 5 days without a test, but that's with the expectation that everybody is masked. And because we had chosen to go mask optional, we were going to require a test to return. That's the way I recall it. Is that?
And I want to clarify, that's for COVID positive people, right? You could return on day 5 or 6. If you are a close contact, you can do the rapid testing next day.
If you're
Just a close contact with no
from
symptoms.
school. Yep.
From
Yep.
school, yes.
From school or school-related activity, yes.
But I think you're right, Phil. If we're going to take the opportunity to make a tweak to these protocols, do we need to acknowledge that if we don't have supplies, what should it look like? And is it okay to require masking for 10 days in lieu of that rapid antigen only if we don't have it? Or does test to stay just not exist because we don't have the tests, is the question. I think I'm most interested in a creative solution that ensures that we have kids in school the most and as safely as possible, but.
I want kids in school also. If we have the tests, I think we have reassurance in using them, and I'd like the option to use them if we have the tests. But if we don't have the tests, then yes, clarification from you guys on what you'd like it to look like would be great. But if we have the tests, I would like to use them as we've stated.
So I guess maybe the question is, what would you like it to look like if the tests are gone next Monday and the tests are gone? What is it?
I'll
that you
throw
want to
this
look
out, all right? So other area school districts are implementing a mask to stay program. So essentially, if we don't have the test to conduct our test to stay program, then the option would be, if you're identified as a close contact, you can return to school if you wear a mask, and you ride out that period wearing a mask, as long as that's for the 10 days identified by the district nurse. It's different. We don't have the security of a test result, and I think that's why the board built in the test to stay program. But ultimately, it provides a mitigation factor, and it keeps kids in school. That's one thing that could be considered.
And you're talking about that for close contacts.
Correct. CDC recommendations would suggest that if a student was COVID positive after 5 days and no symptoms, they too would be able to return to school wearing a mask through day 10.
What's county health recommending?
They are following CDC. So any of our positive kids, right now are being closed out on the end of day 5. So we'll have to make contact with them tomorrow. So I would also ask that whatever changes we make, can you give me a day to contact these parents? But yeah, and close contacts too, they're saying that they're quarantined at home for 5 days and then they can return on day 6 if they want. Now, granted, we supersede the health department for our school system, so we can say whatever works for us.
But if we follow CDC, we would be reducing the amount of quarantine time.
Correct.
Correct.
From 10 days to 5 days,
Correct.
with or without the testing.
If we take that out. I think that, that's the next level. I think, I'd be concerned about the mask to stay, day 1 and day 2. I mean, we're just seeing this thing explode. And usually if they're gonna get symptoms, from what I'm seeing anyways, they're getting them within 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that would be, if you're gonna do an option, we don't have testing available. If we have testing available, I agree to do it, but if we don't, at least that way we'd have 5 days to.
And frankly, Tim, 5 days out of school is better than 10.
Correct.
To me,
Correct, yeah. You'd still be cutting it
in half.
in half.
And to be very honest, majority of the students at the middle school today that I was quarantining were exposed on Thursday or Friday of last week.
They're already,
Yeah.
they already have their days.
This thing's moving so fast. that
Right,
it's-
it's, yeah.
By the time you contact them, they can come back to school if this policy changed.
Which is unique parent conversation.
So I believe what I'm hearing is that, because that would be a little longer time for close contacts than what it would be if we have test to stay, obviously. But what I think what I heard the two of you discussing is that in the absence of tests for the test to stay program, students would have a 5-day quarantine, for lack of a better word. I don't know what the right word there is. I'm going to use quarantine. And then the right to return on day 6, provided they're masked for day 6 through 10. And that would apply to either group, whether they were positive or close contact.
Yeah, so foundationally, before this whole testing, not available thing came up, I was looking for consistency between days, between all of the different whatevers were going on in your life, whether you were a positive or a quarantine, because that definitely helps my health staff, our parents, our teachers in understanding where we're at. So I was looking.
So that consistency would be helpful to
Yes.
you guys as well.
So I'm hearing us talk about two things. We want to handle them individually, I think, to keep it clear. So the first one, we're gonna assume we have tests and everything is we're well supplied and we have everything we need. So the first request to amend would be to, to reduce. Do we have the sample? We do not have the sample. So we're going to reduce quarantines to 5 days. Individuals may return on day 6, as long as they successfully participate in test to stay. And that is regardless of whether they are COVID positive or close contact. Do I have that correct, or is that wrong?
That's not what I understand, if there's
Okay.
testing.
Okay, if there's testing, can you set me straight, Sam?
Yep, if there's testing, so they could do testing through day 6.
Okay.
Day 6 would be their last day of testing, but we would ask that they wear a mask for an additional.
So they can test day 1.
Those would be for close contacts.
Yep,
So for close contacts, they would test through day 6.
Yep.
And then wear a mask through day 10.
Yep.
For COVID positive.
Yep.
They would quarantine
through day 5,
through day 5, test on day 6.
Yep.
Wear a mask through day 10
Yes.
and come back to school.
yes.
Okay.
And are you doing a roll call on this, that I need to start getting ready, or?
Yes, we will do a roll call on that. But is it clear to everyone what this first ask is? Let's make sure we all understand.
I'm not sure I'm with you.
Okay, so currently, individuals that are close contacts have to participate in test to stay for 10 days? Or is it 7?
It's 7.
They participate in test to stay for 7 days. This would reduce that to 5 days and then require them to mask to the end of the 10th day. For COVID positive individuals, they do not have an option to return until day 10, 6, till day 6.
That part defines it.
It-
Yep.
It's
Yep.
day 10, correct? So
Mask through
today,
day 10.
No, the current is for.
COVID
yes.
positive. Currently, if you're COVID positive, you cannot return until day 10.
Day 11.
Day 11.
Complete a 10-day quarantine.
Can't come back till day 11. This change would reduce that from 11 to 6 days with participation in the test to stay program.
And they have to be symptom-free.
Yes.
CDC says improving symptoms.
That's
Fever-free
reckless.
for 24 hours and improving symptoms.
I think that's reckless, but that's just me. I think it should be symptom-free for 24 hours.
Well, in here, on the recommendation does say symptom-free.
Yep. So what we're talking about is in yellow in our board docs.
Yep.
In the test to stay program. Block, right?
Mhm, yes.
Do you want to leave that as symptom-free or symptoms improve?
I'm okay with whatever you guys want. I will just state that Greene County is going to go by symptoms improving, not symptoms free, which is totally okay. But there will be a
It
difference.
becomes a bit subjective.
Absolutely.
I mean,
But I would say to Sam's point, that is sometimes thrown back at us in terms of our inconsistency with the CDC and the county. And so it may be in our best interest to align with the language that's being used by the CDC and the county.
And they will be wearing a mask.
I think we should too, then.
So the motion then, because it's outlined, that I would be looking for, because it's outlined in our board docs, would be to amend the current protocols as recommended by administration and outlined in our board docs here. I think that could be the motion. I would just want to make sure that everybody is clear on what that means. Does anybody have any questions about what that change means?
Does that mean to line it with the CDC and the Greene County Health you're saying? So just improving symptoms?
Well, it says fever-free
But that's not what just
and
Joe just said.
24 hours with other symptoms improving.
Right, so part of the challenge.
What page are we on? I don't even know.
Quarantine.
It's
down here.
different in both spots.
First column?
First column, well, second column too, under quarantines.
Different, that's the problem.
Yeah. Quarantine for 10 days after symptoms started and fever-free for 24 hours with other symptoms improving.
So if we use that language in the other section, then it's consistent.
right.
Because once the fever's broke, they're not contagious, correct? So if they have a runny nose.
That's why I like the idea of the test on day 6, because we don't really know. But if we don't have the test, there is some reassurance provided with the fact that they would be masked.
I mean, if a kid came back coughing, would you be comfortable sitting next to that kid?
No, but that's what they're saying. They're gonna mask them till day 10. So if they're coughing into their mask, but they're in school.
And we have no problem calling a parent and saying, your child is so miserable from coughing that they're not appropriate to be at school. I've done that prior to COVID. Your child is so tired. I know that they're feeling better, but they're so tired, they're just not appropriate for school quite yet. We have no problem doing that in collaboration with the teachers and what they're seeing in the classrooms.
Right, but just to clear, because I think some people are looking at two different spots. So if we're going to use the symptom improving that's in the quarantine section, we would also need to put that down into the rapid antigen test to stay portion, where it says symptom-free instead. I think that's where the confusion is lying.
Sorry, that's,
Okay.
yeah, I was just picking that up. I didn't notice that, Dan, until you made that point, so.
Symptom-free.
So let's just align the language.
Yes.
Do you want it to be symptom-free, or do you want it to be symptoms improving?
Symptoms improving because that's.
Okay, symptoms improving throughout, that aligns with Green County's.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, we'll bring that language down from above,
Above, yeah, on the other side.
so reflect in both areas.
Second vote too, because I got two sets ready, I wasn't sure.
We'll get to.
So there is another something yet.
We're gonna talk about what happens when we don't have tests. But
Okay.
right now, this
Okay.
is what
So
happens
I'm
if we
writing
do have
it right.
tests.
So
We're assuming we have tests.
We're assuming we have tests.
Okay.
And then I believe that we can work through an addendum that says, if we can't test,
Then this is what we're gonna do.
You get a cough drop.
okay.
Believe me, I know that pain. I've done it too many times.
Okay.
I'm gonna open the caffeine now.
Bring any of the rest of this. Okay.
Okay. Is everybody clear on the change that is being suggested by administration? Any additional questions about it? Yes, Bill?
If we run out of tests, we're going to do that under a separate motion. Yes.
So right now I've written down amend the current protocols as recommended by administration and board docs with symptoms improving, assuming we have tests. Does that encompass what we're talking about right now?
I think that we are assuming that we have tests.
That's what I said.
In general.
Assuming we have tests. It's systems improving, amending the current protocols as recommended to be 5 days, right?
That sounds correct to me.
All right.
Would anybody like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Second.
Motion.
Who was the second?
Yep, we'll discuss in a second, Dan.
But was it Phil?
Phil is the second. Yep, go ahead, Dan.
I want to make a motion to amend that to say symptom-free. At least I want to try.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the current motion to update the wording in our COVID protocols to say symptom-free.
Correct, instead of improving.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Which, just for my clarification, is against CDC and against what the Green County is doing right now, correct? Just so I know I'm on the same
So,
page.
I'm just gonna call two more times. Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion? Okay, so the amendment fails, doesn't have a second. So now we're back to the original motion and second. Motion by Cheryl, second by Phil.
Now I'm taking a roll call vote.
Let's repeat.
Amend the current protocols as recommended by administration and board docs for down to 5 days from 10 with symptoms improving. And this is assumption that we have tests to do this.
Yes.
Testing day 6.
Testing day 6.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, would you call the roll, please, Nikki?
Yeah. Nikki Austin, yes. Dan Bardoff?
Yes.
Rich Debris?
Yes.
Terry Ellison?
Yes.
Teresa Keen?
Yes.
Cheryl McGuire?
Yes.
Dylan McGuire?
Yes.
Bill Vosberg?
Yes.
Tim Wolf?
Yes.
All right, so now let's talk about the reality that just came to us, is that we're gonna run out of testing supplies very soon. And you'd like to know what, you'd like for us to codify that in the COVID protocols, so. What is your recommendation? What would you like that to look like?
I wasn't prepared to be put on the spot.
But, so,
And we can-
yeah, in fairness to Sam and the rest of us, this was pretty late breaking information for us, and so this wasn't originally part of the recommendation. I don't know that, as a group, we've had the opportunity to really sort all of that out because it just came to us at the end of the day. I think, given some of the conversation that we heard from the board as we were sorting through all of this, I think it makes sense to talk about what role we would employ masking as a mitigation strategy if testing is no longer available or not available at that particular time. And would we be willing to employ a masking policy that could build in, Tim, I think you had suggested, a 5-day period where students were still quarantined, but then return on day 6, masking through day 10. I think we could live with that. I'll speak for me personally. I think we need to look at a masking strategy that will allow more kids to access school and minimize the number of quarantines. And I think if you consider our heightened COVID response plan, essentially we're going to masking as the sole mitigation strategy that will protect us and virtually not conducting contact tracing. There's exposure notification, but we're using the masking to protect us. And so, sorry, believe me.
Water.
So that would be, I don't want to speak for Todd, Ron, Sam, or the rest of the team. I think if the test to stay program is not available, I think we need to utilize masking to get kids back in school versus saying everybody's out for a full quarantine, because that would be catastrophic to the educational practice in our schools.
So mask right away, don't wait 5 days. Is that what you're saying, right?
Well, I'm saying the board can certainly have that discussion. I think initially what I was thinking was I offered, there's a mask to stay program that's being used at a few area schools. If the board decides that employing a 5-day wait period is what you deem appropriate, we will certainly support that and enforce that as you determine
And
necessary.
of those, there's 3% coming back positive of.
That was our latest calculation, but I would caution you that that was
Higher now.
prior to the current
Yeah.
variant, which likely would significantly increase that number. But
You said you caught a number today of just the ones you did.
Yes. Yep.
You said just a few minutes ago that the Greene County and CDC rule is without the test to stay is 5 days, and then they can come back.
Yeah, they could
And
come
you're,
back.
so we just went with the analysis of that's aligned to them, and now you're saying to go against that.
no, that's not what I said, Dan. What I said is there's other districts that are using a test to stay program. And I cited what Tim said in terms of a 5-day wait, that we could certainly do that. But I'm just providing options that are on the table. So I think it has to be clear that, you know, the board has to decide whether or not we're gonna wear masks and come back right away, or if you wanna build in that 5-day quarantine period before, students would be allowed to come in.
Do you want to make all the kids quarantine or not?
Well, does it make sense to have the test to stay for the 5 days, but then when we run out of tests, we just say, go back? And then if we get more tests, then we reverse that.
Right.
And they're quarantining for the test. It's like we're making it less hard to get back essentially, just because we don't have tests.
So what you're suggesting, Dylan, would be
Do the
the
5
test to stay
days,
program
do the-
minus the testing in the morning.
minus the testing after that, basically.
Yeah,
So
because
to replace the test is the mask to stay at day 6.
So to participate in test to stay, you have to mask currently. So the alteration would be, if we don't have tests, they still can return masked. We just don't have the test to give them. Is that correct?
Oh, that's not how it
I guess my
works.
question
That's
would be,
what
if I
that's
don't
what I
have
heard.
tests for day 1 through 5,
Yeah.
do you want them home? Or
That's what I
do you
thought it
want
was.
them at school in a mask? I guess
Yeah, I'm
that's how
saying
I
if
see
you
it.
bring them back to school with a mask, what's the point of the test to stay program in the first place?
That's why I thought you were saying stay
Yeah.
home for 5 days if we
Yeah.
run out of tests, and then on day 6, come back with a mask.
Not
Is
to
that-
mention that it
Yeah.
keeps it clean and consistent for you
Because otherwise, it
enforcement.
doesn't make a lot of sense
Right.
to get the test in the first place.
And to be honest,
Yeah.
by the time we're catching these positives, they're probably on day 3, 4, or 5.
Kids aren't missing 5 days of school, right? It's maybe 1 or 2 when we catch this.
Okay, so let me restate that then, make sure I've got it correct. What we're suggesting is that when we run out of tests, if you are a close contact, you'll quarantine away from school for 5 days, and on the 6th day, return masked
Through day 10.
through day 10. Same thing with a COVID positive individual.
Right.
Return on the 6th day. If we don't have a test to give them, do we treat them the same way or do we treat them
So
differently?
that would follow CDC,
That would
which
follow
you said would
CDC,
be more
yep.
consistent for
In
your staff.
line with every other
So that's up to
decision
you
that we
guys,
just
yeah.
made.
Yes.
Is there a way, I guess I'm not feeling great about treating like close contacts and there's a small percentage that turn out positive and people that we know are positive the same. Is there a way to, do we want to ration tests so that we do a test to stay for our COVID positive kids so that we know they have a negative test
We
coming
keep-
back? I don't know.
I'm confused. So if they're positive, we keep testing them?
So we're saying they'd
We
have,
only keep testing them if they're negative,
they'd
right?
have a test, they have to test to return. If they're positive, they have to quarantine.
Yeah, so let's say they were COVID positive and then they're improving symptoms on day 6. They can return with a negative antigen test. That's if we have tests. That's what we approved tonight.
Yeah, I don't
Absent
see-
that, they had to stay away for 10 days. They couldn't come back. We didn't have a way to get them back any faster. So now we can bring them back after 6 days in a negative antigen test. The question now is, if we don't have the test to give them, can they still come back on day 6 masked? And it doesn't seem that that's, or is that what the CDC is doing?
I'm also feeling this is a really hard discussion for us as a board to have like this and to make these decisions where we're not in the trenches
Yep.
every day. So I'm really struggling with how to make this decision
Absent.
with absent a recommendation on here's what we need because this is what's happening every day in the schools.
Well,
We
and
could do
that was
that.
my question too, is when do we talk about how your close contact tracing? Is that gonna be another something yet? Because I wanna take a burden off of you if this is too much. I don't wanna hit 50 before we break you. If this is too, you know what I'm saying? So when do we talk, when is that coming in too? I don't wanna lose sight of that.
The contact tracing, yep, the contact tracing ends at the,
Once we get to the height.
once we get to
I
the
know,
heightened COVID
but
response
but
plan,
that's
it
not what I
ends.
heard. I heard that it's overwhelming already. So I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't wanna get to 50 and then say, thanks, Sam, now you get a break. I wanna, maybe we need to have a conversation about what that really looks like for those living in it.
Well, we're probably there, we're probably there now.
Yeah.
Right?
Honestly,
I mean,
we're-
honestly, we're.
But I mean,
we're
was it-
going
So do we
like
just-
this in the last 2 days, you've had
That's not what we're
up
talking about
here,
right now.
right?
We gotta get going.
So you're already there.
The next couple days are probably gonna put us into that
So we'll be there
position,
in
so I can live in it for a couple
Okay.
days.
I wanted to hear that from you, because if the number's 40 and you're like, I'm done at 40, then we need to change their numbers. Or
Agreed.
that's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
Agreed.
no, I'm okay giving it a couple days and seeing where that part goes.
All right.
So
That's a great question.
let's do this about let's not solve the problem before it happens kind of thing, with the absence of tests. If we're headed towards the heightened COVID response plan anyway, it's sort of a moot point. I think we give you guys an opportunity to regroup and come back with a recommendation. If it needs to happen faster than the next board meeting,
Then we
we'll
meet
do the
in the
executive
executive.
committee and
Yep,
we'll make the
that's fine.
decision there.
That way you guys have some time
And
to think
then
about it.
that way you guys have some time to sort of think about it and ponder what it is that may need to look like. Is that fair?
Does that make sense?
Okay, all right.
So we're not, so I
So
did
we're
all
done.
this for nothing? Oh, ready to go.
Just like that.
Does anybody want to have a vote on anything else COVID related?
Nikki's
just so we
ready.
can- Nikki's ready.
I was ready.
All right.
We voted,
So
yeah,
that,
we
vote-
voted
yes,
yes.
that decision was made.
Yes.
Well, so effective tomorrow, but I think we build in a grace period, and you and I, well, we can all talk about it, but I think the reality is we can't expect those kids and staff to, you know, we don't have 4-year-olds watching with their parents, hopefully. So I think we're gonna have to build in a grace period and communicate that through the remainder of this week, and then next week we really start enforcing that, if that seems appropriate to the board.
Sounds good. Okay. Move on to the next item. We're drawing lots for Board of Education election on April 5th, 2022. Traditionally, Ron has had and he does have his bowl of papers, and Cheryl has been our picker, so are you comfortable?
Cheryl's not in here, but she has a family member, so I was gonna have Phil draw.
Okay, all right. Phil, will you pick the papers for us? So what we're drawing is the order. Names will appear on the ballot. We have 6 people for 3 seats this go around, I believe.
Yeah,
So
we have 6 for 3, we have 2 incumbents and 4 new. We have Kemi Blackburn, Rich Dupree, Eric Ekdahl, Jared Hitchens, Dylan McGuire, and Kevin Bissell. You can draw and then Tim can confirm. This will be the first name that's on the ballot, so number 1 position.
Eric Ekdahl.
Eric Ekdahl. Number 2,
Dylan McGuire.
Dylan McGuire. 3,
Jared Hitchens.
Jared Hitchens. 4,
May Blackburn.
5,
Rich Dupree.
Dupree. And 6,
Kevin Bissell.
you did a little better, Rich. I think Scott Schmidt had about a 3 election run where he was always the last name.
Catch a break.
Is it Kami?
Kemi Blackburn.
Kami Blackburn. And then,
Okay, so those are our lots, and best of luck to all those individuals.
So those are the 6 names. That'll be a vote for 3 situations, so.
Yep, well, 6 on the ballot. You can pick any 3 you like.
And because of that, we don't need a primary. If there would have been a 7th, then you would have had a primary where you would have narrowed it down to the 6, but with 6, it's vote for 3.
Okay. Next item we have is approval of new MHS classes for 22-23. Let's move forward with that one. I'm just contemplating if we need to table any of the rest of this, given the.
I was
Given
thinking
the
the
hour.
same thing. I was, had the same question.
I think maybe we might want to bring the report cards and launch back. Does that make sense? Is that something you guys would feel comfortable bringing back at the next meeting? And then we go forward with the rest of the items? Okay. All right, so let's talk about the new MHS classes for 22-23.
Yeah, so at our December curriculum meeting, Jeremy presented new courses as part of our regular process we do yearly. So really, they're just here at the board level for final approval. Committee members heard the new courses, supported them, and now they're here for you guys. So if there's any questions, I'm sure Jeremy can answer them about specifics related to the course.
Does this replace 3 or does it just 3 more?
3 more. So what will happen, first week in February, kids will make their requests for courses. And these may not run if kids don't sign up for them or ask for them. So what they'll have is just different options when they sign up on their sheets. If for those who are familiar with that at the high school level, kids will request the courses, and if there's no big numbers in those courses, we won't run them. If there are, then we'll run them.
And that's in place with other electives we have,
Yes.
right? If there's not a certain amount in something that's existing,
Correct.
then you wouldn't hold that one.
Something won't run. It could be the new course, or it could be a course that we had offered in their area. We felt like all these courses though are moving towards newer trends, things we're seeing, podcasting, especially the, that social media kind of stuff.
And I think if you weren't at the curriculum meeting, I'll just share that teachers did an outstanding job talking about why they're doing them and bringing some new energy and some new ideas to some of these courses and develop the three courses. So they were really, I think, exciting, and I think kids will like them. So I think it was really.
That's one of our biggest things, is trying to create some relevancy and create some engagement and interest in all of our courses right now, because we'll talk about launch later, but that's another way that we often get questioned from kids, why are we doing this? Why do I have to learn this?
Would be a good opportunity too, to maybe even engage organizations locally here, because I mean, that's just huge for what y'all do.
I would make a motion to approve the new MHS classes for 22-23 as presented and recommended by the curriculum committee.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Nikki and a second by Teresa by voice vote. All those in favor? Any additional comments or discussion? By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Okay. Next item is the approval of administrative and exempt staff compensation study. This is the second time that we've brought this back. So now we have an RFP for sure that we're thinking about going after for 10,500. Anything to note on that, Ron?
No, we had the recommendation coming forward from finance, and so that would continue. It was the proposal from Carlson Detman, which was 10,000, and I believe the recommendation from the finance, which I don't have directly in front of me, but is, I should be able to see it somewhere, is that we also do the additional 500 for to study the leave. And so you can either do either, because that's under the threshold, so you can either do the motion for the 10,000 or for the 10,500. I know what the intent is, so.
We
I'll make the motion, Rich, to approve the proposal from Carlson Detman, an approximate cost of 10,500 for the salary and leave comparison study as recommended by the finance committee.
Second.
A motion by Tim and a second by Terry. Any further discussion?
Ron, when would this be approximately completed? When do we? what's the time?
May. So by the start of May, that's one of the reasons we wanted to make sure we got action tonight, so.
Thank you.
Additional question? By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item is the approval of open enrollment capacity in for regular and special education students for the 22-23 year. This is a statutory requirement we do every year. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, that's correct. It's pretty straightforward. This is very similar to what we've done in years past. We recommend that there's no limit to regular ed open enrollment spaces for the 22-23 school year, and then we provided the recommended special ed program limits. Those are very similar to what we had last year. I made a couple of adjustments based on the severity and needs within those programs, but for the most part, they're fairly consistent with what you've seen in years past.
Any additional questions for Joe on these? Entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to not limit open enrollment spaces in any regular education grade level for the 2022-23 school year, and to limit special education open enrollment spaces for the 2022 and 2023 school year according to the recommended case manager limits as proposed by Joe Monroe, Director of Pupil Services.
Second.
Okay, good motion by Dan and a second by Terry. Any additional conversation? By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Move on to item G. It's the approval of the girls swim team co-op for the 22 through 23 and 23 through 24 school years. You gonna run with this one, Joe?
This one didn't come through me, but I think it's pretty straightforward. I think we're just looking for continued approval of that co-op agreement. It's been a successful partnership over the years. I think it benefits the district, and the administration would recommend the approval of that co-op agreement.
Where do they agree? I just have a question. It says the Badger Conference, and are we gonna be in the Badger Conference? Like, how does that work?
Swimming would stay.
For swimming would stay in the Badger Conference. Okay, there you go.
most of Rock Valley does not have swimming.
Correct, and so there are a
got it.
handful of schools right now and some of the other programs that have the reciprocal. And so if that comes to be where we would move out, then we would have to ask to be participants of the Badger, much like some of those other districts are currently doing for some of those specialized programs like tennis and golf already.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And there's some other schools jockeying for position, as you can imagine, about what this realignment should be, so it might take a little longer than we thought.
Yep.
Okay.
Shocking. Because we didn't get information on that.
Okay.
So moved.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Dan and a second by Teresa to approve the application for girls swim team co-op with New Glarus for the 22-23 and 23-24 school year as recommended by Jeff Newcomers. Any additional discussion? By voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. As approved.
Before we move on, I just want to put out there, something similar is girls soccer. The numbers are really low. I think that we need to investigate potentially co-oping and to keep that program, so. I think he knows about it, but I think we got to take it serious.
So the next two items we had were report cards and lunch. I want to make sure we give those two items the time we want to dedicate to this, so we're going to table those for this meeting. We'll bring them back at the next meeting. So now we're on to informational items, boardsmanship. I want to do extended invitation to board members to participate in the high school principal interview process. So if there are any board members interested in participating in that process, please let Joe know. And he will coordinate that participation. Also, facility surveys have started to arrive in mailboxes and inboxes. We did get one bit of feedback from a community member. I responded and they asked for it to be forwarded to the board, so I did copy you guys on that communication. Anything for administration, guys?
Rich mentioned surveys are out. As of now, we already have 573 responses. I'm assuming that those are all probably online responses because mail probably hasn't had time to turn around and get back to them yet. Last time we did the survey, we had 1,431 responses, of which 450 were paper, so about 1,000 online and 450 paper. So we're making good progress certainly on the online responses, and then we'll see next week how they pick up from there.
Generally, what, 900 or so is.
Yeah, I mean, at 1431 was a great number last time. I mean, if we have, 800 to 1,000, I think the fidelity of the responses they would say would be indicative, and the numbers don't move much once you get to that point. So we're well on our way to that, and hopefully we'll meet or exceed where we were last time. The other thing I just wanted to briefly say is state convention is next week. Many of the board members are staying in a different hotel than the one I actually happen to be staying in. So city has it all set up and it's all organized. However, believe it or not, hotels check-in people sometimes mess things up. So if you have an issue, you may have to give them your credit card to reserve it. And if hopefully they get it right on our bill and doesn't hit your credit card, but if it does, then we'll certainly reimburse you. And then for those that are in attendance, the board dinner will be Wednesday night at 7. So.
Thank you, Ron.
Cindy, do you have time to change your hotel plans if you're not staying all nights or not, like planned?
You can change up until 24 hours before, I believe it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, you guys are in that. Mine's committed, so that's why we don't put everyone in that hotel because it requires a 3-day commitment. So.
Board of Education correspondence, the one correspondence that we had received, the board's aware of. Committee reports, we'll go around. Dylan, anything from you?
Nope.
Dan?
Nope.
Terry?
Library, the library committee met last week and they changed their their rules that they will be following with heightened COVID. They will, instead of not doing any curbside, they will stick with doing curbside.
Okay.
Even with higher COVID.
Nikki,
Nothing.
Teresa?
Curriculum met tonight and went over elementary phonics, the letters program, and beginning of their ELA process.
Tim?
No.
Phil?
No.
Cheryl? Okay. Any agenda items for future discussion from board members? Liaison reports. Anybody hear from Angie or?
I have not received a message from Angie.
I don't see anybody from the press. So we're going to go into a closed session. Plan is to adjourn from closed, so we won't be coming back into public. Closed session will be regard to Wisconsin statute 19.85(1)(c), considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, to wit, administrative contracts. Wisconsin statute 19.85(1)(e), deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business, whichever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed sessions, to wit, administrative contracts. If somebody would like to make that motion at 9:15.
Second.
Got a motion by Nikki, and a second by Terry.